Right, okay, so this last little exercise is adding shape but for circle, but in order to add circle we need a new class to represent a point. Okay, because the circle has an X and Y position, and to be fair, we could have, if we didn't have this facility, we could have just said X centre, Y centre, and kept it as separate values. Okay, but it makes sense to create a class for this. So we've got this definition for a class called Vector2. So let's create that first. And it's quite a simple class. It's got a constructor and a couple of values. That's it. And they're all public. Wrong project. Right, okay, so I'm going to add that class first. So add class Vector, can't see, Vector2. Make it public. And it had, I'll find the diagram again, two public fields X and Y. So they're public. Whether that's good design or not, that's what I was told to do. And it's got a constructor where we set the X and Y values. So we've got public Vector2 float X, float Y, and we're going to set those two fields up now. So this dot X equals X, this dot Y equals Y. So remember that this is referring to the field up here, and the X is referring to the parameter, which it actually is coloured light blue in the theme I'm in to distinguish it. That's it for that class. So now I can implement the circle class. So I'm going to add the circle class. So circle, make it public. Remember, if I don't do that, it will not be visible to the testing project. Right, okay, so this has got a centre value and a radius which are private. So private centre, which is a Vector2. Oops, can't spell. Vector2, and that is called centre. And a private radius, which is a float. It's got the same constructor set up as the other shapes. So we have got, I'm going to do it sensibly, I'm not copy pasting this one. So the order was provide a centre and provide a float for the radius. So we've got a Vector2, centre, and a float for the radius. Oops, I can't spell radius. That doesn't look right. Is that right? It doesn't look right. And we're going to call the base. And if you do type that, it will tell you what. Oh, it won't, because I didn't inherit from shape. Big mistake. Right, so it's telling me it wants the colour. This one doesn't provide a colour, so I'm going to, again, I'll just use my grey colour. I'm going to create the other constructor, which was to provide those three things this time, so the centre, radius, and a colour. And I want to pass that on to the base, the colour. Right, so I've got the same thing where I'm being provided, so I'm actually going to run, I'm not going to do the base on that one, I'm going to call this one. I've done something wrong again, but I don't know what. Oh, I'm going to pass them all. Because I don't want to duplicate. So just like I did for the triangle one. So I did that. When they didn't provide me with a colour, I picked a colour and passed it on to this. I said this. So it runs this code and then calls that base to give it the colour. So I'm just doing that, that's all. Right, so I've got to say this dot centre equals centre. So normally the default you do when you make a class and you have parameters for the constructor, the constructor's giving you some data for a reason, you save it. So we tend to always save those values. So this dot radius equals radius. Right, okay, so the last two bits I've got to do are implement, there's a public getter called center. So let's do that one first. So all my getters and setters I put at the top, methods at the bottom. So I'll start with the constructors and then the rest of it. It's up to you how you do it. And sometimes you might want to move these things around, depending on what you're working on. Remember, you can always do this. Close up. Use the little minus things to close things up so you tidy, shorten your code. Right, so I'm doing center. So that is a vector2, call it center. It's going to be a getter. I'm going to do the get on one line, so I'm just going to say return that center value. Okay, so that's that done. The other ones were the two that replaced the base class shape one, so that's get area. So that again was a getter. Area was a float. Call it area, and again we've got to do a calculation here. So I'm going to do it in one line. Area of a circle is pi d or 2 pi r. What's 2 pi r? Circumference. Yeah. So I've got to do pi r squared. Right, luckily there is a standard library that has a definition for pi. Unfortunately it's a double and we're using float, so let's cast it.
What's the difference between them? Because I use math F and it works, but math didn't work.
Is there a math F?
Yeah, I don't know if that specifically means everything for float all over.
Might be, because I think by default the math library uses doubles for everything. I think. So yeah, all it is casting of the math library probably. So yeah, you can do the same thing if that's what you want to do. It doesn't matter, as long as don't put 3.142 because it's so inaccurate it's unbelievable.
Well, if that's pretty accurate though.
It is not.
I mean, that's
Not if you start using that in calculations and repeated calculations, it ain't. It's way out. Way out. Right, okay, so I want to do r squared. So actually, the best way of doing r squared is to do that. Right, so we've got this same problem. We want to override and replace the original one. So remember, the new goes there. So he said public new, but get Visual Studio help as much as you can. Even if it doesn't give you exactly the right answer that you wanted, it gives you halfway to the code, and that helps. And then the final one is the toString, which was a method, so I'm going to put that at the bottom. So that's public string, toString, doesn't have any parameters, and it's just going to return some description of the thing. Right, so I want to keep it in the same sort of format as the other one, so I'm just going to look what I did for the triangle. Oh, so I had thing, parameters and area. So I'm just going to say circ, and then I add center with a colon, and then the center is obviously two values, so that's going to be center.x, and it's public that, so I can see it. And then I'm going to put a comma. So I'm doing a lot of concatenation here. And then I want the radius, so I'm going to say rad. I'm going to put rad. No, I'll put radius. And again, this is getting long, so I'm just going to go down onto the next line. You can't split a string, a literal string, but you can, if you're doing concatenation, you just Go on to the next line after you've done plus or something. Right, so the radius was just radius. And then I want the area. And that was just plus area. Okay, and that's, again, it's telling me that if I want to override, use a new keyword, so I'll just put new. And that's the implementation of that one.